So, this might be a little bit awkward. You all may or may not be aware of a game called Delta Force Hawk Ops. It's a game that's very similar to Battlefield, and I would say most people are kind of excited about this game. There was a little bit of controversy when it was first announced, but as time has gone on, I think people are warming up to the idea of this Battlefield competitor, especially seeing the state that Battlefield 2042 is still kind of in. I mean, 2042, it's a little bit better now, but I still think people are really losing faith in the Battlefield franchise. So, another free-to-play Battlefield-style game? Yes, please. Now, the developers of Delta Force Hawk Ops is a studio called Timmy Studio Group. They actually sponsored this channel in the past. Thank you all for your sponsorship. I don't know if that makes this worse or better, but as always, I appreciate people who sponsor the channel. And this studio is also the developer of the port of Call of Duty to mobile. So they're the developers of Call of Duty Mobile. Again, I don't know if that makes this worse or better. We're gonna have to see, and I am actually interested in your all's opinion about this too, even though you guys don't know what I'm talking about yet, because there's not information yet that explains why this has happened. It could be for not good reasons. Maybe it's just an innocent something or other. I'm not entirely sure, but it is slightly undeniable. So let's get into what that is. Recently, there's been a video that's been shared on our Discord community server that a bunch of us have been watching, and as soon as I saw this, I was like, oh no. The video is a YouTube video that was created by a user called Fire Mountain, and if you guys want to go and subscribe to him, definitely do so. But this video shows a comparison between the firearms from Call of Duty and the firearms from Delta Force, specifically the animations. There's a lot of videos out there, even with like our game and say, I don't know, Squad, where they'll just make animation comparison videos. It's kind of a niche. You've probably seen videos like that before. I assume that's what this YouTuber was doing when he made this video. He's just comparing the firearm animations to another game, Call of Duty. The issue here is that the animations from Delta Force Hawk Ops to the animations of Call of Duty are really similar. Like, not just kind of similar, basically identical in ways that I feel like are fairly impossible unless Delta Force Hawk Ops, for some reason, was actually using the Call of Duty animations in Delta Force. Now, keep in mind, this studio has previously created Call of Duty Mobile. Again, I don't know if that makes this worse or better. That's just a fact, and maybe that would explain why this is the case. But Activision isn't publishing Delta Force. In fact, I don't even believe that Timmy is even an American company. So how these animations from Call of Duty got into Delta Force, I don't really understand, and I'm actually just at this point really curious as to how this happened. Now, the only connection that I can make between these two studios, other than the fact that they might have been hiring maybe some of the same developers that worked on Call of Duty Mobile, is Tencent was an investor, 5%, which, I mean, for a company like Activision must be like an obscene amount of money. But still, Tencent's a 5% owner of Activision. And they are also the publisher for Timmy Studio Group. Or actually, I wouldn't even say that they're a publisher. I believe Tencent is a parent organization of Timmy Studio Group. So it's a subsidiary. They own that entirely. Now, that could potentially explain this connection. It could potentially explain why Call of Duty animations are making their way over into this other game. In fact, if you were to go deeper into this, you would find that the developers who are currently working for Timmy Studio Group also have work history working for Treyarch, also working for Infinity Ward, where I assume they were working on Call of Duty games. Because, I mean, why else would you work there? But again, I feel like the most interesting thing about this situation is because this is obviously work that was in a previous game that I would say is near identical, if not absolutely identical. In fact, I would go as far to say, knowing how Unreal Engine works, knowing how like the inverse kinematic systems work, I would go as far to say that these are probably identical animations, but they've just modified some of the transforms and some of the parameters so that way it works with the new weapon model. Because that's something that you can do in Unreal Engine. You can make an animation, but then you can set it so like the hand position is slightly different, and it'll play through the same animation, but you'll just have slightly different procedurally generated animation movements so that way it works with like whatever weapon you put in that person's hand. But the core animation can still be the same even with slight differences. And I would say that that's what this looks like to me. But unlike previous videos that I've made talking about a game that's utilizing assets that are either stolen or ripped or something of that nature, in this situation, this is a studio that not only previously worked on Call of Duty games, but also actively right now has a team that previously worked on Call of Duty games. Honestly, probably even team members that created the exact same animations for Call of Duty that they're now utilizing in the new game. But the only question that I'm really left with after knowing all that is like, what does that mean? Like, there's a lot of people that are kind of freaking out about this, and they're like, oh, Delta Force, see, they're using the same animations. They ripped that from Call of Duty. And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, but aren't they hiring the exact same team members that made Call of Duty? And it's like, yeah, but you still can't take the Call of Duty assets and put it in a new game and sell it. If you made them, can you? And I guess the only answer to that question is it depends. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this today, because this is a very interesting situation that shines a light on elements of the game development industry that I think a lot of people don't really think about when they buy a game. These game development studios do consist of people. These people are artists that sell their work to the studio. In some cases, they don't even sell the work. They just license it and give permission to use. But after that studio lays them off, they can still continue going on and making other games. In some cases, games that are very similar to previous games that they made. However, again, a lot of that and the restrictions of what they can do after they get laid off depends on the contract agreements they had with these studios. Now, Activision is known for being, Activision. So I would say that that is definitely one of the things that first comes to mind when I see this. And I'm like, dude, I feel like Activision would not let that slide, letting another studio that they don't have some kind of ownership of utilizing basically identical assets in a game that's not made by Activision. But who knows? Maybe there is some kind of agreement there that makes this legal. I'm not entirely sure. But what I can say is, having worked on games myself that are even pretty similar to this, and going very far out of my way to ensure that all of our development team members do not even remotely utilize assets that they made for previous games or are sourced from somewhere that they don't have permission to use. We go incredibly far out of our way to like enforce that and ensure that nobody does that. It is odd seeing a game like Delta Force Hawk Ops, which is allegedly going to be a really big title, using assets from Call of Duty that appear to be almost identical, and not just for like a couple weapons, seemingly for almost like every weapon in the game, like across the board. I have been seeing comparisons of a lot of weapons in Delta Force and Call of Duty, and I don't know how many weapons are going to be in Delta Force, but there's at least like 20, 30 here in this video alone. That is that's a lot of Call of Duty assets. And I think that this definitely shows at least how much rinsing and repeating there is in the industry. Not just between like studios kind of like reselling their own games now. You've got other studios now that are utilizing assets that were sold in other games that are the same assets. And it just kind of makes you wonder what kind of era we're in from an industry standpoint. It seems like there's a lot of studios out there that just want to get a game out. They want to sell it as fast as they can. And I feel like there are definitely shortcuts being taken. But is it illegal? Is it legitimate? Is there a reason for this? Right now, there hasn't really been any statement about this, at least none that I could find. In fact, if anybody knows anything further about this, please let me know down in the comments. But there is definitely some reutilization of assets going on. How that happened, I'm not sure, but it does appear to actually be happening. Otherwise, Delta Force does look like a good game. It does look like a cool project. I am interested, but at the same time, I feel like nowadays it's so easy to get paranoid because there are just so many studios that are doing things that are suspicious. And there's been a lot of studios that have burned us as players in the past. And I think, if anything, going forward, studios should have significantly more transparency about these kinds of things, not less. Whether that actually happens or not, I'm not entirely sure, but that is definitely what I want. And when I see stuff like this, I can't help but talk about it. Now, before I end this video, I just want to say everything in this video is just my opinion. I am not saying for sure whether these assets were used illegitimately or not. I'm not even for sure saying that they are the same assets, but I will say from what I can see, the evidence to suggest that they are identical is compelling. So please, nobody sue me. Which is another thing that it's a shame that people have to be worried about that kind of stuff nowadays, but I'm just putting that disclaimer in here just in case. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, guys. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. If you want to stick around, press that subscribe button. And yeah, if there's any other things like this that you guys have seen, please send them my way. I'm very curious about stuff like this as someone who is also working on his own game. Industry matters like this are very, not just interesting for me to research and learn about, but I would say is vital for me to learn more about and understand more about. So if you guys have any thoughts, let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.